Okay, so now I give the floor to Chris, that is going to moderate the session and is going to welcome the panel and to make the next step in this.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And as it's been said before, but I'm still happy to see you all, or those who can be here, to see you in the flesh after we've known each other, been talking to each other for a year and a half, even more. So thanks for making it all the way to Bilbao. This session is a panel discussion, and we've got three distinguished panelists, which I will present in a moment. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Merveille. I'm the coordinator of the European projects team at Heilmaier. Heilmaier is an energy cooperative, a citizen energy cooperative, also known as Rescoop, here in the Basque Country. And yeah, we are one of the demo cases involved in the Y project, as Cruz has already presented. So in our panel, we have Maria Kannavou of E3M in Greece. We have Philip Heilmaier of the German Energy Agency, and we have here present Jorge Fernández of Orkestra. And I think, so each panelist has a 5-minute introductory statement. The topic of the panel discussion is what actions have member states taken to fight the high energy prices and to reduce the external dependence of fossil fuels. And so yeah, each has got 5 minutes as an opening statement, and then we will have a panel discussion. So I first give the mic to Maria.
Hello, greetings from Athens. I actually have a very brief presentation, if this is okay to share with you.
Yes.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yep.
I think it's probably visible now, or let me know if it's not.
Now.
Okay, great. So thank you. I'm Maria Kannavou. I'm part of the primes modeling team, and these past few months we have been doing a bit of modeling work to see closely the REPowerEU plan, which focuses on measures that can enable, that can reduce the dependency of the EU and lead to the reduction of fossil fuel imports from Russia. So our modeling work and our findings have focused on a list of short and medium-term measures that can enable the decrease of the dependency. So some of the short-term measures that we have been analyzing these past few months focus on the diversification of the gas supply. And this can happen either by ensuring and focusing on additional alternative, let's say, gas pipeline routes, or additional LNG infrastructure, and increase the LNG supply of Europe. Other measures that are very important in the short-term period are, of course, the demand-side behavioral measures that can enable the reduce of gas demand. And this can go along with energy efficiency measures and investments in either renewables or heat pumps that, of course, can lead to the reduction of gas demand. And apart from the demand side and buildings and the reduced demand there, of course, there is a very important measure of fuel switching in other sectors like power generation. Some of them, let's say, medium-term measures, apart from the energy efficiency that we discussed for the short term, are the diversification of gas supply, but not in terms of supplier, but in terms of the content of the gas mix. So there we have a measure of injecting biomethane to the gas grid. So there is a need to develop biomethane production infrastructure and therefore reduce natural gas needs. Along with the development and use of biomethane and its injection to the gas grid, we have, of course, a very important measure of ensuring hydrogen production and hydrogen injection to grid, and of course to examine where we could see a substitution of gas with hydrogen. Regarding the power generation, which is a sector that consumes now natural gas, there is a need, of course, to accelerate the green transition. So there are measures that we have been examining to increase the penetration of renewables, solar PV, wind offshore, and of course this goes along with very significant investments in power grid and storage that can enable the deployment of variable res. What is very essential in this REPowerEU context actually is the decrease of gas demand. And what we have been studying is that if you do not have a very essential decrease of gas consumption, it is very difficult to substitute the Russian natural gas. So we have been examining many scenarios that are in the context of the Fit for 55, of the clean energy transition. And we have been examining how Europe and what is the limit, what is the threshold of natural gas consumption. And this is actually our main finding, that although you can indeed stop the imports from Russia, if you do not have measures that can support the significant decrease of gas demand, it is very difficult to substitute these imports. Okay, this presentation is a bit more detailed and I think I'm out of time, so we will be discussing more later in the panel discussion. So this is a very brief statement from my side.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I would like to invite now Philip Heilmaier to give his short introductory statement. Hello, Philip.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like also to share my presentation. Oh, that does not seem to work. Now it's working. Excellent. Thanks a lot. And give you a brief update on the situation, what Germany is currently doing. So the situation was like that. The last autumn, Germany got a new government, which was a green government in the economic ministry, where everybody was a bit excited. They came with huge plans to accelerate the energy transition, and then high gas prices and the Russian war in Ukraine hit basically. And despite Germany has a quite I feel impressive set of strategies they're already applying among different sectors towards the energy transition, it's still in fact quite dependent on Russian gas. So if you look at the red bar here in the middle, 27%, so around a quarter, still comes from primary energy consumption in Germany is gas, and half of that, more than half of that, is actually coming through pipelines from Russia. Where's that gas actually used? You can see that on the bottom. Only 20% is actually used in the power sector, so in power plants for power and heat production. The rest of that is mainly used in the industry sector, especially in the chemical industry, which is kind of a basis of the German overall economy, and 42% in the building sector. This gets important in a second. So Germany is still quite dependent on Russian gas, so it got quite hit heavily from high prices in the current situation. And Germany took a few measures. The first one was basically to start diversification of sources. So they started building LNG terminals. So far, there had been none in the German system so far. They also slightly delayed the coal phase out that they recently decided on. They employed strategies to boost renewable energy, especially in the power sector. There are certain new requirements for filling up the gas storage. And there are also some financial transfers directly to consumers, so directly transfers to reduce the energy bills, but also almost free public transport at the moment. Nonetheless, there are also some measures that Germany did not do compared to other countries. First, delaying the nuclear phase-outs. There's still 3 power plants left that could have been, or the phase that could have been delayed, what the government is currently not going for. And also Germany did not put any financial incentives to reduce gas reductions in the industry or building sector, or set a price cap for gas, as some other countries did so far. Where we at the moment, gas storage is filling up, and but nonetheless, we still have the situation that most of the measures that Germany applied are still more in the medium and long term. There haven't been so many measures that directly forcing industry and households, where the bulk of the consumption is happening, to reduce their actually demand. So there are currently a lot of talks going on. What if the pipeline Nord Stream 1, which most of Germany's gas is coming from Russia at the moment, if that would be cut off at some point, this would lead to a major disruption in the winter time this year, because the gas storage would not be filled sufficiently. So the situation is a little bit, I don't know if you're following social media, but there's in the last few days, there's been this video going viral of a glacier erupting, and you see a guy watching at this glacier collapsing, and it runs towards him. And to be honest, it feels a little bit, a friend of mine, he commented on that on Twitter, that the German situation kind of feels like that, because high energy prices have not yet crushed in, have not yet fully reached consumers. The gas shortage has not yet reached the full economy yet. We're kind of in the situation watching this glacier collapsing, and now it's actually time to put up measures and incentives to really reduce consumption in the industry and household sector, I believe. And how we're going to do this is basically the biggest discussion right now in Germany. Thanks a lot.
Fernández of Orkestra here in Bilbao. So, Jorge.
Well, thank you very much, Chris.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us. We, Orkestra, we are part of the University of Deusto. We're a research institute within the University of Deusto, and we are collaborating in the Y project. So here's my colleague Macarena. Most of you know her for sure, at least by email. So I was asked to discuss very briefly, to open the discussion, what's been going on in Spain regarding the response of the government to the energy crisis we're facing. First of all, I would like to say that I've been working in the energy sector for 23 years, and I feel I know nothing. And every day I wake up to incredible news. I was, while coming here, I was listening to the radio, and you know, the Spanish government is proposing profit tax on energy companies. We're seeing amazing things, and in my opinion, we cannot discard any scenario within the next 6, 8, or 12 months. And even in the medium term, anything can happen on the political front, on the regulatory front, on the markets front. So it's really difficult to assess the situation. But you know, having said all this, which is a huge disclaimer, you know, I have a presentation, but I don't know if yes, 2 slides. Did you load it? Oh, I'm sorry. It's only 2 slides, so 5 minutes. And I'm going straight to the point. What has been done in Spain? What the government is trying to do to help consumers. Okay, I'm sorry about this. Couple of seconds. Okay, there we go. Okay, here. All right, so 2 slides. You know, what has been done to fight the energy crisis here in Spain? Well, I would say two blocks of measures. The first one is a block of with a huge number of temporary fiscal measures. That would be the first, you know, the first box. That could be said to be in line with the EU's guidelines about how to respond to the crisis. We don't have time to get into details, at least now, in this 5-minute opening discussion. But you know, there's like 2 sets of measures. One in October 2021, which was called the toolbox by the European Commission, and the other one was Repower EU in March and May 2022. And those include a lot of ways for member states to tackle the energy crisis, and especially temporary fiscal measures. So what we have in Spain, you have in that box, reduced tax rates, electricity tax, the electricity production tax we have here, VAT, a discount in the social check for vulnerable consumers, reduce electricity access rates for industrial companies, direct aid to energy companies, industrial companies, I'm sorry. This is incredible if you think about it. The European Union has lifted the lid on state aid legislation. That's one of the bases of the European Union. So it's all, you know, for now, it's frozen, that kind of legislation. And that, I think, tells us, you know, how extraordinary are the times we're living now. Aid to companies that are exposed to carbon leakage risk, incentives for fuel switching, direct subsidies for fuel transport. These measures have been adopted everywhere throughout Europe in, you know, in different ways. Okay, what's probably different about the Spanish case is the second set of measures, which is that you know, basically focusing on the policy or the strategy by the Spanish government to intervene the electricity market with the idea that you can control energy prices by directly altering the rules under which electricity is bought and sold. So basically, we have a measure with regulatory capture of inframarginal revenues in the electricity market for all non-emitting technologies, and for values above 67 euros per megawatt hour. That's one of the measures from a few months ago. And the most recent one, which has been in place for less than a month now, is a cap on natural gas prices that can be internalized in the offers that the marginal power generators can send to the electricity market. So this is to say that a natural gas combined cycle cannot offer to sell electricity into the spot market beyond a given limit that is set by the government. Okay, so the value of natural gas that you can incorporate into your sales offers into the power market, it has been capped actually at 40 euros per megawatt hour. And I have written down the spot price for gas right now in Spain today is 142. Okay, so we have, the government is saying you cannot offer beyond 40 euros, but the spot price is 142. Okay, and then they have like two more proposed in the Spanish Parliament right now. Started yesterday, and the President of Spain announced a profit tax for energy companies whose revenues are beyond 1 billion euros per year. Okay, so second slide, please. And I will finish very quickly. What's been happening with this measure? First graph, the one on top left, you can see the measure started operating this cap on gas prices on June 14th, okay? And what you can see in the last month is that the black line, which is the price of electricity in Spain, has gone down, has decoupled from European power prices, okay? Just to give you figures, today, the electricity price in Spain is 159. That would be the black line, 159. In France, 447. So 159 in Spain, 447 in France, 352 in Germany. If you look at the fourth quarter of this year, and this is amazing, we have 148 in Spain for the forward price for Q4 2022. Same figure for France, 865. 865, it's amazing. And Germany would be 443, okay? So, you know, the immediate effect of this measure has been to decouple the spot price. It's not the actual price that consumers see. Why? Because the measure is being financed by the demand for electricity. Okay, so you get a new spot price, equilibrium price in the market, but then you have to add for consumers, you know, the difference between the 40 euros that is the cap on natural gas prices set by the government and the spot price. So companies are not losing money for applying this measure. It is being paid by the demand, and the final effect. And I'm going to leave it here. We can discuss more if you want. Final effect can be seen on the right bottom corner graph. Okay, and we have an effect on final prices seen by electricity consumers in Spain since this measure was started in operating of almost 13% since 14th June. I'm going to leave it here. I'm sorry, I think I went over 5 minutes, and I'm open to questions if you have any. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the three panelists for their opening statements and the vision from a EU point of view, then from the German case and the Spanish case. And I would like to start with the round of questions and the debate with what Jorge finished on. So call it the Iberian exception, the fact that Spain is allowed to use this cap. And I understood that the reason for this was because of the poor interconnection, so that the Iberian Peninsula is poorly interconnected to the rest of the electricity system in Europe. Do you think that's a fair reason, or should other countries also, other member states also be allowed to have this this price cap? And what would be the consequence? So I'll start with Jorge, but I'll give the other two speakers also a chance to reply.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Very quickly. First of all, let me stress the message that we're living extraordinary times. So we cannot rule out any scenario. So will it be adopted elsewhere? We don't know. What we know is that a forward price or a price of electricity in France of 900 euros per megawatt hour is just unbearable. There's no economy that can bear those costs. Okay, so anything can happen. Secondly, it's what's happening here in Spain. It's basically a political decision. So it's not based on technical issues. It's not based on an assessment of how the market works. We have ACER's assessment, and we have assessments here by the energy regulator. The market works. Okay, but there's a political decision to help consumers, and I think there's ideology behind this as well. So I think the Spanish government at present doesn't believe that the market is a good mechanism for allocating resources. So that's what's happening here. The effects, I think, I don't like the measure because I believe that markets are going to allocate much better than any official in a desk in a minister somewhere. Okay, that's what I believe. But I also think that you need to do something because we're under a huge threat that the economy is going to explode, and we need to do something. So. We'll see what happens, but I don't like the measure from a technical point of view because I think in the medium run and in the long run, it disturbs and it disrupts all the incentives for efficiency. It creates wrong incentives for investment. It makes energy cheaper when we have a huge shortage of energy, and it's not sending the right signals. Okay, I think fiscal measures to help vulnerable consumers should be the way to go.
So you're saying it is actually, there is a risk of it slowing down the transition to a greener system because of lack of incentive to invest in green and renewable energy.
One of the measures that I've presented here, which is a proposal, and we'll see what happens after the summer here in Spain. They're trying to take away revenues from wind farms that were installed before 2003. So you can argue that perhaps there are windfall profits for some of the companies, but the point is that once a government has done that once, the probability that it will do it again is huge. So we need to think, we know that the energy transition is going to be about making investments, a lot of investments in networks, renewable energies, and all kinds of clean technologies as fast as we can. So if we disrupt the incentives to investors, we're just breaking perhaps the mechanism that is going to help us out in the energy transition.
Okay, thank you for your opinion on that. I'd like to pass the floor to Philip, and if you could, from a German perspective, reply to this. Would Germany at some point maybe also consider this cap, or would they continue with the measures that you have presented before, because they think that would be sufficient? Or is there a scenario where they might also take this step? I think you mentioned it in your presentation, so please, Philip.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. So there has been obviously also very similar discussion on that also in Germany, that as Spain introduced that, also price cap was discussed, and because it seems so straightforward and like on a very first level seems like a right thing or obvious thing to do. Nonetheless, I'm quite happy that so far these views have not yet gained majority amongst the German government. And as it was already said just now, I believe that there are two reasons for that. The first one is that Germany is directly in the center of Europe, so directly surrounded by other markets. So if Germany would just do that, it would disrupt the whole Central European power market and the power flow. So it would have massive effects on the other countries around. So it's quite unlikely that Germany would go alone or alone here. And the second thing is that, as it was just said, we're living in extraordinary times, and the market, and my understanding, and also from a lot of other economists in the German government right now, that the market is really one of the key tools that we have to distribute the gas to those consumers where we need it the most at the moment. So there has been a clear signal from the government that they're currently not planning to intervene with this market signal or price signal, but instead then use targeted incentives or compensation measures, incentives and compensation measures for consumers who actually need it. The measures that have been taken here so far are quite broad in a sense, so not very targeted. So reducing costs for public transport for everyone is quite or giving compensation or price compensation directly to every consumer is quite a broad incentive so far. And I feel that in essence, it would make much more sense to really target this much more closer to more vulnerable households or vulnerable industries. And I feel like keeping the market as it is and then compensate for those who are in essential need is the better way to go here.
I'd like to get into that a little bit further in the discussion. But first, I'd like to ask Maria about how she can address this issue on an EU scale. So again, this Iberian exception extended to more countries, more member states. How could that possibly affect the market? Philip has already said that if Germany were to do it, it would cause a massive disruption. But would other member states be able to do it, willing to do it, and would it be wise or not?
Yes, thank you. So actually, I agree very much with Philip, how he started his reply. So what I believe it is important here to acknowledge is the fact that this cap has adverse effects on cross-border trade. So what is important here is to think of a situation where there is a unilateral price cap, which can work, which will not affect cross-border trade if all countries introduce a similar measures, a uniform price cap. But if we examine separate situations where only one or two member states introduce such measures, there is an effect on cross-border trade, and this is what I believe it's very essential. If we examine other measures that we actually Greece introduced, the collection of windfall profits from generators, which is I'm sure a topic that we'll discuss later. If there are measures for the collection of windfall profits, provided that these are uniform, I believe this is the right way to go, so that the internal European market has no adverse effects. This is my take on this.
And so you think that this would not necessarily have a negative influence on investments in efficiency and renewable energy, if I understood you correctly?
Exactly, because I do not think that renewables need windfall profits to invest. I mean, renewable technologies are competitive nowadays. What renewables need and what secures the continuation of renewable penetration is the long-term security. So some sort of bilateral contracts that ensure capital recovery. And this is the key for obtaining the lowest possible cost of capital. And with these measures, with bilateral contracts securing renewable investments, this does not jeopardize the penetration of renewables.
Okay, maybe I would like to hear the view of Philip and Jorge on that aspect. So use the windfall profits to essentially correct the market, right? That's what you're saying. Jorge?
Well, I think that we need to differentiate between short-term temporary measures to respond to an extraordinary crisis and what would be medium-term responses to the crisis. So as an economist, I find it very hard to define or identify windfall profits. So to start with, it's not an easy concept. If you think that markets work, there's always going to be companies in a market that make profits above the average profit level in the market. And those are excessive profits. But at what point do they become windfall profits, which is something that you're not entitled to? And that's a very difficult question. The European Commission, in its guidelines, what it says is you have to look at the costs, actual costs of the generators. You can only look at windfall profits by looking at the whole life cycle of an investment. You need to take into account what the actual return on investment is, and not temporary increases in revenues. If you think about windfall profits, then you you have to put on the table the concept of windfall losses as well. So from a theoretical point of view, it's not an easy concept to deal with, okay? Now, having said this, I think it's a reasonable response to have companies help consumers in a situation such as today's, because as we mentioned, I mean, given the prices markets are seeing for the winter, it's just unsustainable for the European economy, and you need to think about we need to survive first this situation, and then we'll deal with the medium-term responses. That's my view. I think there's going to have to be some sort of response at the European level to contain prices, energy prices. And in my view, I might be wrong, but I don't have any assessment or any analysis to support this. But I think the easiest way is to intervene the gas market and not the electricity markets, which are much more complex. But again, just to summarize, if you're going to act on profits and claw back some profits from the companies, it has to be a temporary measure. But today, you know, some politicians in Spain are talking about making it a permanent measure. And I think in that scenario, you have to either go to full 100% regulation or let the market work. But the in-betweens just don't work with electricity, I think.
Okay, thank you. I was a little surprised by you say they're hard to identify. Maybe what as I understand it, they're hard to quantify, because I think, I mean, the market, the electricity market or the energy market in general is so complex. Most people don't understand it. I've been working not nearly as long as you have, but there are many concepts I still don't grasp. But the windfall profits I find very hard to understand where it comes from, but I can understand it might be difficult to quantify them and to say, well, this yes and this no. Is that what you're saying?
No, my point is a double point. It's difficult to identify them because I mentioned that in a well-functioning market, there's going to be companies making profits above the average. So my first question was, you know, at what point are you saying that those are, you know, profits you're not entitled to? So it's very difficult, you know, when economists think about windfall profits, you need to think about contestable markets. You need to think about competition in a market. You need to think about the product. And one of the issues here, one of the conceptual issues in Spain is that I think that the politicians don't understand that electricity is one of the most homogeneous products in any market, if you think about it. So of course, there are different technologies to produce electricity, but the product, electricity, is just indistinguishable, no matter what technology. So what they're saying is that it's not correct to use certain technologies because you're going to be making a lot of profit with those technologies. It's just to answer and let the other panelists talk. It's very difficult to identify them, and it's very difficult to quantify them. Now, that's my point.
Thank you. That was a clear answer. I'd like to ask Philip to also give his view on this.
Yeah, I think I can be rather quick because I basically completely agree with Jorge here on that, because it's theoretical, quite complex to define that, but on a political level, it's obviously very, very clear, or in my understanding at least, it's very understandable that from a political side of views, you would like to take some of this money and use it to lower the impact of the crisis. Otherwise, we would have like a huge redisbursement of costs in that current situation that we are in. Nonetheless, the risk is actually really that if you start it once, the question is how long you're going to keep up those measures, or if you're going to intervene yet again at another situation. But it was already said, so I don't really have anything to add on here.
Okay, thank you. And Maria, do you have anything to add to that? Well, you actually introduced it, but let's say, do you have a a final pushback on that, perhaps?
Yes, that I indeed believe that it is very important to mention that these measures that we are discussing, as Jorge mentioned, are short-term measures. They are not measures that should stay for the medium term, but it is an essential. I see it as essential steps to address a very, very extraordinary situation that will take place already. I mean, it's here, and hopefully it will not last very long.
Okay, thank you. I see we only have a few minutes left, and one of the things I would like to briefly discuss is transport. So, as Philip said, in Germany, public transport has been made almost free. I think regional tickets cost €7 a day, and you can use any regional transport means, if that's correct.
It's €9, but
it's €9. Okay, thanks. In Spain, as far as I understand, they've gone the other way. They've reduced the price at the fuel tank at the pump. I mean, by 20 cents, and those 20 cents have been gulped up immediately by the increases of price. So it was a zero operation within a few days. I find these two very contradictory things, right? One is the pushing public transport, and the other one is saying, well, keep using your private car. Philip, how was the take-up of this measure? How many people are using? Do you have any idea of how many people are using this cheap public transport?
So to be fair, Germany actually also implement also the second measure, so that it basically implemented both measures, supporting public transport on the one hand, but also supporting buying gasoline and at the station. So you have actually two contradicting measures towards each other. The one coming more from sorry. So how successful was it so far? There has been no official evaluation made yet, but from what we can see in the newspapers and on the discussions is that a lot of people have actually bought, I think like about 20 million of 80 million have actually bought this ticket, and you have to a lot of times, especially in the weekend, quite full transportation. So the direct, I'm sorry, it was taken on very well, but especially in the cities, and the Transport Ministry is currently evaluating it and probably looking also for some kind of continuation for that, because it was also, I mean, it was not the cheapest measure of all, to be honest, obviously. The biggest struggle so far is probably in the medium term is how to ramp up and also rebuild then the infrastructure that is needed for that to cope with that many new customers. There are, I mean, as there hasn't been really a big evaluation, this is still like speculating a bit, but it seems that was used by all groups of consumer. It was used by those who actually already using it, by those who use it sometimes, but also it reached a few new customers. So it's kind of a mixed bag, because I mean, you obviously don't really want to target those who are actually using it. It doesn't really have any additional effect in terms of saving energy in that sense, but chances are pretty high, I feel, at the moment, with the current government and the political support and the sheer number of people who bought it, that this measure could be prolonged in autumn next year, but we will see. It would be speculating to predict that at the moment.
Thank you, Philip. Here I live in Spain, and from what I see in the media, there is not a lot of talk about moving a modal shift, moving people out of their cars and into public transport or sustainable transport. Do you know anything more about that, Jorge, as in what the political will is for that? And
just a quick comment. As I mentioned, we these days we're in the State of the Union address in Spain, and the government has announced free public transport passes for the last quarter of this year for pass holders. Yeah, it's 100%. Well, that's what I heard on the radio this morning. But well, the funny thing is that it's only, I mean, it only applies to monthly pass holders. So I think there's, they're trying to get some money, to put aside some money to help cities reduce the fares in city transportation systems. So we have the debate here, but we don't have a measure yet.
Well, one of the things I've always missed here is actually being able to buy a monthly pass. As far as I know, it doesn't exist in the Basque Country. I don't know, maybe some cities do it, but sorry, Maria, this may be a really tough question for you. Do you have any idea of how this is done in other member states, or whichever you know, or maybe you know Greece better? Could you give me your feedback on this?
Yes, sure. So in Greece, there is a subsidy, but this has to do with the petrol and the gasoline used in private cars. So there is a subsidy from the government, because of course this increase in fuel prices led to the decrease of the use of cars, private cars. I believe there is a model shift, let's say, towards public transport, but I'm not sure that the Greek government has very specific measures to support and increase the use of public transport. And of course, here there is the issue that this, at least in Greece, and of course, I believe in all member states, has affected a lot more the low-income people. So the effects on the different income levels is very important to look closely and design measures that can address this issue.
Yeah, thank you. Cruz whispered in my ear just a few minutes ago that this session actually continues until 10:30. So we've got more time than I thought, which is good because I've got loads more questions. Then I would like to move on, and I think Maria has already started a little bit on this. So my perception is that because of this energy crisis and these high prices, people are becoming aware of the value and the scarcity of energy. I think while we had cheap energy, people were not too much aware that it was necessary to be efficient, and only people in vulnerable situations were. Now people are actually taking measures. They understand what the value of energy is, that it doesn't come for free, and they are trying to reduce their bills. So in that respect, I would almost say, well, high prices have also some positive effect on the general awareness. Unfortunately, there are vulnerable people who are now really suffering because of this. So what do you think would be the right interventions to help these people in particular? So some countries like Spain have reduced the taxes on energy, which is a measure that affects all. In Belgium, for example, or in Flanders, the government has given 100 euros to everyone, just a flat reduction to everyone. Is that effective? Is that fair? I have my doubts. Yeah, what other measures, and what would be something that is easily easily implementable? It needs to be affordable, of course, for the member state, yet fair and reach the people that need it the most. I will start again with Maria, if that's okay.
Yes, sure. Well, one thing that I was thinking when you were mentioning your question is actually this rebound effect that took place during COVID, and what will happen. I mean, of course, the increase of energy prices led to the decrease of demand, and there is this question: what if we support with subsidies and other measures consumers, and then you have the increase of demand again? So this rebound effect, okay, it's a bit out of the question, but I'd like to point this out. So now about measures, well, I think that a way to go would be to implement measures such as special social tariffs, which can lead to an effective distribution policy, actually. I think there are no easy measures or easy answers to this.
I'm fully aware that this is a tough question. I think all member states are struggling with this. So, but feel free to, if you have any radical idea or any interesting idea, then feel free to share it. I'll pass the floor to Philip, and that might give you some more time to think if you have another. So Philip.
Yeah, thank you. I feel a bit with Maria because it's indeed a very tough question. It's very dependent also on the actual specific social welfare system of the different countries, what is already in place. But I feel that the most difficult question that actually lies behind that is how we want to distribute the costs of this crisis per se, and at which level do we want to redistribute, and the state needs to come in to compensate for losses of households, for instance. So one question that I was discussing recently with a colleague is the question, okay, what does it mean for, I mean, you have this very clear cases, I feel, where you have, for instance, households that already receive a high amount of social welfare transfers because they're very vulnerable. And I would say in these cases, it's quite straightforward. You should definitely quite quickly enlarge the social welfare compensation that is transferred to these households, for instance, for housing costs, for energy costs, so that they actually are in line with the current pricing reality. And I feel that this is like a non-brainer, to be honest. And yet we see, especially in Germany, that there's a huge delay between the adaptation of compensation or social welfare adaptation to this new cost reality. Where I'm quite skeptical, or where I really don't have yet an answer to, is what do you do with medium or medium households which have a medium income, which now obviously have to bear higher energy costs, and to which amount, or to which sum the government should support the household in that sense. So and it's a question that we also had during Corona times, for instance. We had it in other economic crises before, and I feel that at the very moment, especially in Germany, I feel that there's a very we are very quickly in saying that it's the task of the government to compensate for a huge amount of the losses of the disruptions that we are seeing, and we're very quickly in setting up all kinds of different programs. So, for instance, that the German government set up this Entlastungspaket that just every household should get 300 euros. But to be fair, there are a lot of households who don't really need this measure. And I think that this is really one of the core questions where we still don't have an answer yet, but we are quite quick at the moment in setting up new funding programs or compensation programs where I feel they're not necessarily needed, because in the end, I mean, there's a war in Europe at this very moment, and this comes with huge additional costs, and I don't feel that the government is in all senses always the right to cover up all that costs at once. There are certain cases where you definitely need support for households, but not in every case.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Jorge, it's your turn.
Wow, I'm writing down a lot of things, trying to respond in a coherent way. It's difficult to answer all, that question, because that's the heart of it, right? But I was thinking that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a wake-up call for us all. And if there is anything positive about it, is that the energy transition, which we need to do anyway, is going to be looked at in a different way. But the problem is that we need to get to the heart of the debate, which is, people, we need to understand that we are all reluctant to use less energy. And that's going to be a must over the next few months for sure, and perhaps over the next few years. We also, as consumers, don't like the economic signals. We don't like the economic signals about scarcity of energy. We don't like high prices of energy. We don't like high prices of CO2. We don't like when, as an economist, again, we have the recipe. We know that if you have externalities, you use taxation tools to incorporate the cost of the externality into the real price of products. And that's going to induce the right response by consumers, okay? But we don't like that. We don't like high CO2 prices. We don't like high prices of energy. So that leads us to, I think there's also another ingredient in this debate, is that there's little understanding in society. And I think this happens in Spain for sure, and I'm sure in other countries as well, about how asymmetric the impact of all this is. So we are not aware that that we are all suffering, but the impact is highly asymmetric. Okay, so I was writing down, what can be done. Of course, you have to target, you use targeted measures, benefit those who need it most. But the problem is, and I have my colleague Macarena, who has studied all these issues many times. We don't have good statistics. We don't have good information about who's vulnerable. We need to identify who's vulnerable to be able to help them effectively, and then design good policy responses, right? Then, in my opinion, do not disrupt the economic signals to the extent it is possible, because we need to keep the incentives to behave correctly in the current situation. And that implies be more efficient in the way we use energy and help investors make the right investments, okay? But also, if you have measures, the types of technologies and so on. And I think we have powerful fiscal tools in the European Union. All these guidelines that I mentioned before by the European Commission, they give member states huge powers to use fiscal tools, which I think we know that they cannot be permanent, but we have to deal with the short term first. And my question here, what I wrote is that perhaps we don't have good distributional tools. For instance, in the case of Spain, we have this government right now announcing a lot of measures, but it's a minority coalition government with limited political power. So is it going to be able to pass all these measures that may have a distributional impact? And that's another question. I mean, it's the political.
By distribution, sorry, by distributional, you mean that it's differentiated between the kind of consumer, or redistributing? Yeah.
Well, we know that there are a lot of fiscal measures, but you can design fiscal measures to help certain collectives in society. Okay, but then you need to design how that's going to be paid for. And that second part of the sentence is the one that worries me. The political, how are you going to politically implement all that to make sure that whoever needs it most is going to get the subsidies or the aid, and whoever needs it less is going to pay more.
We've been talking about short-term and medium-term since the very first slide. On the presentations. Is there a risk that the short term, can I finish and then I'll give you the floor? Is there a risk that the short term measures might actually work against the long term, medium and long term effects that we want?
Is that
Yeah.
Very quickly, because I feel like I'm talking a lot. I think that you need to limit the timeline of these short-term measures. Otherwise, you're going to seriously have an effect on incentives to invest. And we know that the standard recipe for the medium term is to become more energy efficient, to continue with the penetration of renewable energy in the electricity sector, to electrify wherever we can, and to make sure that investors are going to be there in the next 10 years. We know we have to do that. So if you extend too much the short run, then you're going to have an impact on the medium runs for sure. That's what I think.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience. So Andrei.
Yes, thank you very much. And maybe I will turn so Philip and Maria can see me at least. Welcome. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion so far. And I have one reflection and one question to all the panelists. So my reflection is that I also agree definitely with Jorge saying that the current situation is a wake-up call, not only regarding the energy transition, but basically it might be a wake-up call to think more broadly about sustainable transition, because it's not only about energy that we consume, but basically about everything what we consume and everything what we produce. And we are not facing only energy crisis, but there is still ongoing climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, scarcity of all possible resources. So I think that it is important to put it in a broader context. But my question is goes into a bit different direction, because you meant that you listed and outlined many different measures, short terms, medium terms, long terms, and some of them, or a few of them that you discussed, are not fully working, and apparently winter will be very harsh in Europe. And my impression is that the governments or policymakers in general are not talking explicitly about it. There are some voices from local levels that municipalities are getting prepared for heating centers. So already in Europe, there exist cooling centers during heat waves, but having prepared the municipal buildings into heating centers is something new that did not take place in the past. So my question will be whether you are aware, or whether you have any insights, whether governments from your countries, whether they're actually also preparing some communication about very harsh measures or harsh situation that citizens can be faced in the winter months, or whether this responsibility to communicate is shifted to utilities, or who will take the responsibility to talk publicly about the things and situations that we will be facing in winter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrei. I think Philip already hinted at this with the funny slide on the avalanche coming down the hill. So maybe I'll give Philip first offer to reply.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I hope I was not misunderstood with that, because my picture should actually point a little bit in a different direction, in that sense that I don't feel that we're going to have really a heating crisis in Germany. I don't believe that this is something that we would be expecting, because in the German energy law there's a restriction in there that means that households have are the first one who are being supplied with gas, and that heating has the highest priority, and that's basically a question of and you're also not allowed to shut down the heating system from a land loss perspective. So you have so households have a higher protection in that sense. So I don't really believe that. I'm not aware of any initiatives so far of communities then setting up heating centers or something comparable, because we're not in the situation. I'm not really confident that we will face a situation like that. What I meant by that is more the question of the effects on the industry sector will then be probably much higher in that regards. And the question is basically how this then trickles down, because the regulator will then be in this so saying we have shortages and no clearance of the markets yet, then it's the regulator's need or the regulator's task to come up with a plan on how to reduce the gas consumption in the different industry sectors. But this is obviously very, very difficult because all the different industry sectors are very well interconnected, and you cannot only define, well, this is one company or one industry A, and they're producing this one good and this one is important and this not, because it's like really completely mixed up. And I don't want to be in the charge as the regulators are in that sense, because it's going to get very difficult and it's going to get probably politically very, very messy in that sense. So having said this, I feel that the wave that is coming towards us is more of a price wave and more of a economic wave, but it's not really a heating disaster that we are facing, at least not right now. I'm not aware of any measures that had been taken to prevent this in that regard.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, so it's not a heating crisis, but it could be an industrial crisis, because if
yeah,
household
exactly.
gas, yeah, okay, thank you. Maria?
Yes, I believe that this is very essential to prioritize in a way where gas would be consumed. In heating, for example, first priority, and then some industries. It is very complex, for sure, as you mentioned already, but it is very, very essential. And regarding heating, okay, there are several measures. I would like to hint out a measure that was part of the REPowerEU communication as well, which may sound very simple, but indeed could save a part, not the full amount of Russian gas imports, of course. So, for example, this measure decreasing by 2 degrees the thermostat, it may sound very simple. I think, I'm not sure which member state, but there are measures in public buildings to reduce the thermostat to a certain level. And this is something that could secure part of gas demand. The last thing that I'd like to mention is that it is mentioned that this is indeed a wake-up call, and it is a very extraordinary situation for sure. But if we look, let's say, find the bright side of this situation, I really believe that this crisis will turn to be in favor of the energy efficiency investments, of the renewable investments, and would help to, to accelerate the green transition. I'm an optimistic person, so this is my take on this, although it will be not an easy winter.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay. Yes, we need optimism, Maria. That's good to hear. Thank you. My reading of what's going on in Spain at the political front right now is that we're not getting, I may be wrong, but I think we're not getting very strong messages about, let's say, physical crisis with the supply of energy. I think, politicians are emphasizing that, we have a diversified, natural gas supply, we have good LNG infrastructures, and we only import on average 10% of the natural gas from Russia. Although last month, if you read the figures, most of the importing companies have brought a lot of gas from Russia, perhaps because they're facing what may happen after a cut, which I think, by the way, there's no going to be a full cut of Russian gas. I've read a couple of articles that mention that from a game theory perspective, and I think that's very interesting. It's not in the interest of Russia to fully cut the supply of natural gas. You don't want to lose leverage on Europe. You don't want to lose the revenues, and you don't want to lose the leverage. I think it's going, that's, I mean, it's just conjecture. So, but I think it's not going to be a full cut. Still, the situation is very difficult. Our politicians here are saying we're going to be physically okay, but I think they're not telling people you know, they're not sending the right signals. First of all, they should be much more harsh with the the savings, energy savings message from today. I mean, we need to do it today. Secondly, I think the only way out, when I think about possible measures, I think the only way out is some sort of solidarity scheme in Europe for the in the short run. I don't know. That's going to be. We will need to all ration together somehow energy, the use of energy, and save some energy for the harshest days in the winter. And I think there's going to be some sort of solidarity or intervention at the EU level. That's the second point. And the third point is that I think politicians here don't understand that even if we have guaranteed supply, it just does not make sense to not ration consumption of natural gas if prices of natural gas are at 1,000 euros per megawatt hour. So if we have the worst scenario in the winter, it just does not make sense from a social point of view or from an economic point of view to consume the marginal gas at 1,000%, 1,000 euros. So I think there's going to be economic rationing because that's what makes sense.
Okay, I'm looking to Andre. Was that were they satisfying replies to your question, or? Satisfying, yes, but I think it's going to be a very long discussion. Yes. Mm-hmm. The floor is open to more questions from the audience, and also I don't know whether the remote participants are. No questions. Well, we have 5 minutes left. I thought perhaps I could give everyone 1 minute closing statement, if that's okay. I'll start. I'll start with Maria again because you opened also. Is that okay?
Yes, sure. Well, I think that this is a very, very interesting period, and there are many questions that do not have easy answers, as we've said already. And what I think it is very essential is that we focus on not only analyzing the way to deal with today's situation, but to focus more on issues regarding the design of the markets and the measures to assist the clean energy transition. And I believe that we did that today, and discussing about the energy markets, the electricity markets, and their design that will enable the transition is a very essential issue. On the measures to decrease the dependency, I believe I'd like to say only one thing that I like Jorge mentioned already, that there is an issue of solidarity in Europe that is very essential to be the reply to this winter and to how we will deal with this energy crisis. This is from me.
Yep. Thank you, Maria. Philip?
Yes, it was said already several times that we're living in extraordinary times, and I feel like, I mean, we always had this triangle of protecting the environment, secure energy, and having cost-efficient markets or not too costly energy as the key targets of energy policy. And I feel like this year it all comes together. All these crises come together. We have a price crisis, we have a security crisis, and we still have the climate crisis that we're facing. And I feel that it's a lot of is happening at the moment, and a lot of or the solutions to all these crises are basically turning away from fossil fuel energy from a European perspective and turning towards renewable energies. But nonetheless, it's quite easy to get distracted on the short term, because not all these long-term measures, energy efficiency and renewable energy, really have an impact in the short term. So obviously, we're also turning towards diversification through LNG, for instance, or delaying fossil fuel phase out both in coal and oil as we would have actually needed it to accelerate the energy transition as we need it. And I feel that this is the biggest harm of the current situation, that we are facing the slight risk of sailing towards new stranded assets that we might lock into if we're not being very careful on the measures that we are applying. And I feel that this is one being very, very severe about the addressing measures that react to the crisis, but yet not creating new fossil fuel lock-ins in a sense that would crush our way towards climate neutrality. These are one of the biggest challenges that we're currently facing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's understood. Thank you, Jorge.
Very quickly, well, we understand that the short-run issue is, Ukraine, Russia, and the next winter, and I think we can, again, I've mentioned it at the beginning, we cannot rule out any scenario, any political, regulatory, or market scenario. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we will be surprised, I think. And hopefully it will be with measures that will help us all. But this short-run urgency has to accelerate the medium-run strategy. We need to do that. And we know what that medium-run strategy is. It's increasing energy efficiency. It's increasing renewable energies in the energy matrix. It's starting serious decarbonization processes in hard to decarbonize sectors. We need to do that, okay? And just to finish, I think there are two issues, and when we work at Orkestra and discuss all these energy transition problems, we always end up with the same message. There are two things that we urgently need to work on. First, awareness by the public and by the consumers about the costs of the energy transition, not only monetary, the costs of energy transition and the distributional effects. We've been talking about that. That's one point. And secondly, we need to make sure that all the financing channels work well, efficiently and quickly to make those investments and to make the changes that we need to make in the 2030 horizon, which is the day after tomorrow.
Okay, well, I fully subscribe to that, of course. My own closing statement would be, well, it's really difficult to sum up what we've just said. Just a few highlights, I would say, is several people have mentioned wake-up call. And I think that is for us all. And unfortunately, it's not the first wake-up call we've had. I'm afraid it won't be the last. My perception is that we'll still have a bumpy ride ahead of us, and that people have short memories. Jorge has already said, we don't like the market signals. So as soon as those market signals even go away a little bit, we fall back, and the rebound effect has also been mentioned by Maria. So I'm afraid that as soon as this dies down a little bit or becomes normal, that we might fall into our old habits. So raising awareness, continue communicating about this, I think is very important. Solidarity has been mentioned a couple of times as well. I understand this was mainly in the context solidarity between member states. We haven't addressed at all energy communities. For us, energy communities and cooperatives are, of course, a solidarity mechanism on a local scale. We will continue to work on that as Goyener, and it is also one of the use cases in the Y project. So we'll see a little bit more about that. Like I said, bumpy ride, and we have to make sure that those people who are most at risk don't fall by the wayside, that this transition is also a just transition. It needs to be green, it needs to, all the things that we have said, but we have to include everyone and not make some, what do you call them, collateral damage, as the military people call it. So yeah, thank you very much to the three panelists. Thank you also to the audience. Let's have a round of applause for everyone.